if you look at Goldman Sachs, which Goldman Sachs is, I believe it's the second biggest weighting of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, okay, Goldman Sachs. If we pull up Goldman Sachs 2022 annual report here, we're going to find some interesting things. On page 99 of 264, under loans and debt securities, what we're going to find is 35% of the total, right, is basically EMEA, okay? And just think of the lion's share of that is Europe specifically. Real estate represents 20%. 20%, folks, 20%. If the real estate market gets hit hard in Europe, I can tell you that's going to negatively impact Goldman Sachs numbers in an absolute epic way. And this is where you get into loan contagion problems, what boils over, because one of these banks getting hit hard, next thing you know, it affects another bank, and especially when you're talking about big dogs like Goldman Sachs, right? If we go to page 130 of 264 under management discussion and analysis for Goldman Sachs here, we're going to find something very interesting. Now we're looking at credit exposure, okay? And credit exposure in EMEA, right, which think of mostly, once again, Europe, is about 43% of their credit exposure is EMEA. That's substantial, folks. If Europe was to go into some major deep recession, I can tell you this is going to hurt a company like Goldman Sachs in a pretty scary way. And the thing is, when it comes to this, and when it comes to these banks and investment banks, you don't actually know where the bottom is. And that's something we learned in the great financial crisis. That's even something we saw, obviously, in 2022, or earlier this year, with a lot of those regional banks going under. You don't know where the bottom is, because the way they do these loans, and you don't see a lot, man. You don't see a lot. Then they have off-balance sheet type stuff. And I'm just telling you, man, although these industries are very regulated, sometimes they get around the regulations and it gets messy. And next thing you know, this is like, how did all of a sudden SVB and some of those others all of a sudden go at it? It was like 1 month they were perfectly fine. The next month everybody's like, wait a minute, could these go under? Next minute they're under. It happens quick, right? And so that's a scary thing, man. And all you start to have is a little weakness come in there, and next thing you know, you got a mess, right? In terms of their net revenues last year for Goldman Sachs, 27% came from EMEA. Once again, think about Europe mostly, right? So this is why it matters in a significant way to a lot of American companies. And so if you're thinking about the American markets, right, the U.S. markets, we have risk. And it's not just from like the U.S. side of like, well, what if the U.S. had a recession? It's really from this European side and what could be potentially brewing in the mortgage market, in the real estate market in Europe, and what that could mean and the ramifications of what that could mean for the European economy for the next several years, and what that can mean for, obviously, American corporations when you're talking about significant amounts of credit exposure coming from Europe, significant amounts of revenue, profits coming from Europe, and many other various things, folks. So this is something that I'm looking at, and I don't think it's a risk that's really talked about enough. A lot of people have been talking about the potential for if inflation comes back in the U.S. and the Fed had to raise rates more. That's something that's talked about a lot. Another situation that's talked about is a U.S. recession. It's talked about a lot, right? But what is not talked about a lot, and as somebody that watches a lot of Flip and Flapjack and CNBC and watches these Wall Streeters go on there all the time, they're not talking nearly enough about the risks of the European market and what could potentially happen to the European Central Bank having to raise rates considerably more, and what that would mean for these variable rate loans, and what that would mean for the overall European economy. And could we see a very deep, nasty recession in Europe? It's a potential, folks. It's definitely and it's a serious potential. It's not just like a pie in the sky, like, let's just talk about scary stuff to talk about scary stuff. This is actual, like, legit potential scary thing out there, okay? Elf on a Shelf just hit a new all-time high, folks. Congrats to any Elf shareholders out there. It is absolutely unbelievable. Stock just hit $111 plus here today. Now we are over a 1,400% gain on Elf on a Shelf. It is absolutely incredible. Now, if you're thinking about, like, where's Elf's goalpost? Like, where's this company trying to go over this decade, right? In my opinion, Elf is trying to position themselves, and they're doing such a phenomenal job running the business and running the brand. I think they want to ultimately, long-term, try to become the biggest cosmetics company in the world, the biggest beauty company in the world. What are we talking about from market caps if you're going to become that, right? Elf today is about a $6 billion market cap, right? In order to become the big dog, you got to become bigger than Estee Lauder. Now, Estee Lauder caters to a very small segment of the overall population because their brands are usually very high-end brands that honestly most people can't afford. e.l.f., on the other hand, anybody can afford e.l.f. products, from the lowest end cosmetics and beauty consumers to the highest end, right? And so e.l.f. has a much bigger long-term opportunity. The way I would almost look at it is Estee Lauder is kind of like the Ferrari of cosmetics, right? But Ferrari, yeah, great business, but they can only grow so much, right? e.l.f. I look at as more of like the Tesla, whereas like they hope that everybody is their consumer over time, and regardless if there's a recession or a good economy or an okay economy, e.l.f. should be successful, right? And so that's where I think e.l.f.'s trying to go long term. Now, can they pull it off? I don't know. That's a big feat. If you want to become the big dog, that's a lot, man. I mean, they're gonna have to execute as well over the next 5 to 7 years as they have over the past 5 to 7 years, and that's going to be really hard to do. But I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, damn, the way they've been running this business. I mean, could they become the biggest cosmetics company someday? It's a possibility, but it's going to be a tough challenge in regards to that. Now, cosmetics is one of the best businesses in the stock market. You can invest in. They're some of the best businesses. Period. Estee Lauder, e.l.f. Cosmetics, like these companies make bank, right? And their margins are incredible, and they're businesses that people just, when they're done the product, they use it the next one and the next one. They keep buying it over and over again, and so like a recurring revenue stream, right? But there's ways you can play this without saying, I don't, especially because I know like 85 to 90% of the people that watch my channel, you're guys, and you don't know the first thing about cosmetics, and you're like, I don't really want to look into the industry. There's ways you can play cosmetics without having to pick individual companies like Estee Lauder or e.l.f., for instance, and saying, I think this is going to be the big one or not, right? For instance, you could just buy Ulta Beauty. Ulta stock is a stock that is one of the best stocks you'll find out there for the past 15 years. Absolutely incredible company. They put up just amazing numbers quarter in and quarter out. They're one of the best companies in the world. Like, they're literally one of the best companies you could ever invest in if you look at the past 15 years. Absolutely incredible, right? And so this is a very simple investment that if you're like, I don't know which brands, I just want to make money because people buy cosmetics and they buy beauty stuff and hair care and all this stuff, Ulta's a way you can play it if you want to play it, okay? Another way you can play it is Amazon. Amazon's the biggest cosmetics company in the world. Amazon is so massive, you don't even think about some of these things. But at the end of the day, like, Amazon is the biggest cosmetics company in the entire world, folks. In the world. They took that mantle over, and I think they officially took it over in, I believe it was 2018, okay? And so if you want to play cosmetics and you don't know, which individual stocks you want to play, like, Amazon's just a way to play it, right? Plus you get all the other amazing businesses that Amazon has, AWS and all their other e-commerce business and their fulfillment network and all those sorts of things, okay? Now, obviously, Honest is the highest risk, highest reward play in cosmetics industry, in my personal opinion. And they have other businesses that are big businesses outside of cosmetics, right? They obviously have diapers and wipes and all those sorts of things. The only thing that's keeping me in this stock and why I haven't given up hope in it yet, right? Which it's a possibility I could give up hope in this stock, 6 months, 9 months from now if I don't see them come around with their margins and their profitability. But the thing that gives me hope is their cosmetics business and their beauty business, which those are very high margin businesses. And I think they have a lot of room for margin expansion and getting to profitability. So that's what keeps me in that one, right? Another way you can play it if you want, and this is a very hated stock right now, Target. Target is a big cosmetics company. So, there's a lot of opportunities out there to play cosmetics, beauty, and get in on this industry and prosper from it, then just having to even play stocks like e.l.f. or Estee Lauder if you don't want to play stocks like that. There's a lot of other opportunities out there that you can get exposure to this, right? It's a great industry. It's a great industry. And it's filled with high margin products. Some of the highest margin products you'll find in the world. If you ever wonder how Kylie Jenner became a billionaire, it's from that Kylie Cosmetics. She was very smart to get into cosmetics. It's super high margin business, man. You make bank on it. And Amazon loves cosmetics. Target loves cosmetics. They love all this stuff. Why? Ulta loves cosmetics. Because the business is such high margin that you can make incredible, I bet you some of the best margin products that Target sells, I bet you it's cosmetics and beauty related things, okay?